We are back, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a long while since we had the last live stream here on the Inside Line F1 podcast and on Pits To Podium. But here we are. And this is going to be a rather fun one because it's not a long time left to go for us to begin the 2021 F1 season. And there are just so many storylines to discuss. But we'll get to that. Firstly, my name is Soumil, ladies and gentlemen, as always. And I'm joined by Kunal Shah, as always, once again. And I hope that you guys aren't bored of us yet here on the Inside Line F1 podcast. Kunal, how's it going for you? It's a really fun time of the year, isn't it?
It is. Well, I just completed the 12 hours of Antara. So I've had pretty much been up all night with my, almost 6-month daughter. And I think she was just awake knowing that we're going to have this live stream today. But, otherwise things are well. And things are good with you, Soumil, because I'm excited to introduce the guest that we have on the show today.
Exactly. That is to come. But for me, it's been all right. Just the excitement of a new Formula One season and just buzzing with all the new things that we're having here on Pits to Podium, which you should check out. Also, if you haven't followed us, by the way, you know the drill. You know what to do. Like, share, subscribe, the rest. That is if you like our stuff. If you don't, you can always give us a creative suggestion and what we can do better. But let's move on, Kunal. Let's bring in our guest because I think this should be a rather fun 45 minutes upcoming here.
Yes. So our guest on the show today is Niharika Ghorpade. Start with saying the obvious things and then say some things which are pretty personal to me as well, right? So Niharika is an accredited Formula One journalist, and she just told us, while we were prepping for the episode, that it's been 10 years since she's been a Formula One journalist. She's been reporting from the paddock, and she's been, reporting for some exciting media houses, Top Gear being one of them, Khaleej Times, and several others, right? But
Right.
the part that I'm excited the most to share about is that, I have known the Ghorpade family for 15, 18, maybe 20 years. Okay. I used to race against Niharika's father. And I know that makes me sound very old, but I was fairly young then. Okay.
Yeah.
And I remember at that time, he was one of the oldest go-kart racers in India, right? So that's when the association first started. And then Niharika's younger brother, Parth, was this close to becoming a Force India junior driver. And I know that. So it's great to have you on the show,
Yeah.
Niharika.
Thank you. That's really a unique introduction. And by the way, 20 years ago, even I used to drive K&K go-karts. People forget that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I never saw you at any of the karting
Yeah.
circuits
So
back
I
then.
think I moved out after it became JK versus MRF. And I think I've driven one round of MRF Mondial too. Yeah.
Yeah. So the
The
next
last
time we
is-
all host an episode, it should be at the karting circuit.
Yes, definitely. We should do that.
That should be awesome, shouldn't it? I guess that makes me the only non-racing driver around here, technically. Then, in that case, but that aside, let's move on to Formula One
You
because
have millions of miles on simulators, right? So just the way you have millions of minutes of airtimes doing commentary, right?
Yes,
So,
and your generation really
it
doesn't
seems-
start with go-karts, to be honest.
exactly.
Your age group and generation, though you sound older than both the two of us, your age group starts from a simulator, so it makes sense that you have a lot of miles.
It's a lot of slow miles. I can guarantee you that. It's a lot of slow miles on the sim. But Formula One, that's the interesting thing that we should discuss today. And there's a lot of good stuff coming up. Now, Drive to Survive came out, I think, 3 years today? 3 years from today at this time. And it's produced some really good moments, right? It's shown us the sport from a really different angle, something that we haven't quite seen before. And that's been traditional to all the sports in this generation, with Netflix coming in, Amazon Prime Video, just putting money into amazing documentaries like this one. But there's been an impact, for sure. The Drive to Survive generation has come up of sorts. Lots of new fans coming into the sport through this. But on the whole, Kunal, I'll actually start with you on this one. How would you say Drive to Survive has impacted Formula One? Of course, there's been a few positive things, but there are many going around saying that, yeah, maybe it's not the best thing in the world. It has had a few drawbacks as well. What's your take on it?
That's an interesting point you made, Soumil, because the positioning of Drive to Survive is for the entry level fan. It's to reach out to fans who are on the fence, who have sort of heard about Formula One, Ferrari, Mercedes, Hamilton, Verstappen, and not sort of gotten to follow it. So Drive to Survive uses all the drama that happens in the paddock and, of course, on track to try and bring in new fans. Which is why, for the three of us, for people like the three of us who've been so into Formula One for so many years, the storylines don't make as much of an impact, but nevertheless, we still see it. And I'll also put it this way: it's an expensive marketing tool because it sort of fund the production of Drive to Survive. But typically year, a couple of weeks away from the start of a new season, if you and I and Niharika were to talk about the previous season, nobody would give us any airtime. But when Netflix does that, everyone goes, my God, I want to know what happened in 2020.
It's an expensive marketing tool that has worked wonders, hasn't it, Niharika? It's just amazing to see the reach.
And it's an OTT platform, given the kind of screen time an average millennial today uses. It's a platform which Formula One gets to connect with its audience directly via a phone, a tab, a laptop, a TV. And it has more, I think, what Drive to Survive has really done is it's able to new fans the way one couldn't otherwise. And I mean, if you see the kind of figures Formula One released just about a month ago, we all got a press release of how F1 has beat everything from NFL to other sports and being the world's most interactive sport, including its Instagram handles and social media handles. But then again, if you go into the Bernie years of Formula One, there was a certain element or a part of the paddock that was a hush-hush zone. And what Drive to Survive does is it kind of opens that part of the story that was only available to certain journalists, certain people working in that paddock area, and that inner story, that inside line wasn't there on television. The only part of Formula One you'd get to see is a checkered flag a lights to flag version of it. And now you're getting to see a lot more storylines, plot lines, which you don't have to go and read, or you don't need Sky Sports or YouTube for. So I think that's the part, although I don't think it's expensive as such for Formula One, because they have reserves, they have enough of money for that. But it's also a very innovative way that Formula One has found to connect to its fans, which it did not have 3 years ago. And I think, that's more or less, I would put it that way.
I think you nailed it with the wordplay, the inside line part. Top marks on that one. But I've got to agree, to be honest. In the Bernie years, it was just like the sport felt locked away. There wasn't any source of information. And just the way they've transformed in the last 3 or 4 years, absolutely incredible stuff. But insiders, drivers in particular, are coming up and saying that perhaps they're spinning around stories that they're making it seem like more dramatic than it actually is. Max Verstappen, the most harsh critic of it. What do you have to say about that, Niharika? It's worked, but maybe at the expense of the drivers, some would say.
Yes, because I don't think the production team or even the team involved with Drive to Survive is as grounded in the sport as, say, a broadcaster like, say a Ted's Diary, which you have on Sky Sports. I think a storyline told by him those many years in the paddock is going to make a much more of a difference than a new Netflix team coming in there and covering or dramatizing a particular storyline. So yes, a bit of it is dramatized, especially on Max. Max wasn't really a villain then when they made him look like one.
Exactly.
If you see the first season, they actually made Hülkenberg a hero. And you see the second season, they actually cancelled him. And given the way this world works on social media, where you have the cancel culture, I think if you had to weigh those pros and cons and how that could have impacted his marketable options, I think for Hülkenberg or Nico Hülkenberg, the way that series kind of put him to the top, brought him back down, maybe this third season even puts him there as a super sub again and works for his marketing on the marketing side of things. But by the end of the day, with a platform like that, it's very important to put out the correct information and the right storyline. And with the kind of access they have, where they get to go inside the garages, their cameras can go everywhere. So given that, I think it's very critically important that they stick to authentic storylines and not dramatize it where it can cost drivers their whole image and etc., their whole PR. Because we know how that works when it comes to the driver market later on. It has effects there. So yeah, that's how.
Very easy not to make someone feel like a superhero or supervillain, isn't it, Kunal, using that medium?
It is, and frankly, that's just how journalism has sort of moved into. I'm not going to name websites, but if Helmut Marko ends up looking at Mick Schumacher for 10 seconds longer, then suddenly there'll be stories saying, "Will Mick join the Red Bull Junior Academy? Will he let go of Ferrari and the like?" So what Niharika is saying is, very crucial. It's about making sure that there is that borderline between keeping things authentic and doing excessive drama. But at the end of the day, it shouldn't end up costing people their livelihoods, because they're in a dog eat dog world, or sport as we call it. We've seen with the likes of Checo Perez, best example of how, despite being the most performing driver that Racing Point had, they had to sort of let him go, and so on, right? So lots of positives. I would say it's great, and I'll be honest. I mean, the listenership of the Inside Line F1 podcast went through the roof when the first season of Drive to Survive came out as well. So I'm pretty much looking forward to season 3 and seeing the spikes it brings along with as well.
Should be awesome. But in general, guys, before we move on to discussing the individual teams, what would be one storyline that you're looking forward to this season of Drive to Survive? And something regarding Formula One in general, not regarding the teams and the drivers, but something in general about the sport, any particular rule change as such that might have happened that really excites you from the past year, that is.
You want to start with me?
For sure.
Yeah. I think the whole formats that they're experimenting, the no Fridays, then the whole Saturday 2-day format, and also the sprint races. That's going to be interesting, and that can also throw up. And also the calendar, that's going to be very twisted. We open with Australia and Bahrain. This time we have Bahrain, Imola, Portimao, and so on and so forth. So that's, if you've seen in the pandemic season, there were a lot of tracks in the beginning that suited the Mercedes. And later on, the tracks that suited the Red Bull or the Ferrari came much later in the season. So that helped a lot of Mercedes' initial wins and dominance. And this time it'll be interesting to see over the next 22 races how that dynamic plays out, because it's going to be a long season now. It's not going to be 17 races. I think it's going to be really, really exhausting compared to the last one. So that's going to be really interesting. Those are the few I would look forward to.
What about you, Kunal?
The big storyline, I think, is going to be about how Formula One defeated COVID-19, right?
Yeah.
Despite having the crazy season cancelled in Australia. And, even Australia, it was a comedy of errors. It was about who's going to cancel first and whose insurance will foot the bill. And how they handled the Australian Grand Prix was really shambolic. But from there, they literally, bounced back to sort of deliver, like Niharika said, 17 races in a really cramped calendar. And also, I think 6 out of 20 drivers had the COVID-19 virus by the end of, everything. So in all, I'd love to see, them share more insights into how Formula One and their management sort of defeated the COVID-19 virus to deliver to us the 2020 Formula One season.
And not to forget, Formula One also became the world's first sport to kickstart with its own rules, its own bubble. The way they handled it was better than any government or country could have handled the situation. Also, what I'd like to see is how the logistics worked with all those restrictions, and Europe being the whole hub at that particular time when the season kick-started. They had more cases than we'd had at this point, in this part of the world. So yes, that's one thing I would like to see as to how it all unfolded, if the cameras have gone there and been able to capture that. And I think the other part is also, one has to give credit to F1 that today, even if you see the IPL and the whole IPL bubble format, the one that Formula One has been far better than the one being followed by these guys at the moment, by their teams. And they all followed after F1. One can't forget that. They all took that same and modified it. So I'd be interested to see if Netflix actually highlights that. And even the other storyline I think I would like to see is the whole Red Bull saga with Honda ditching them. And that play, because it was something we were hearing of and speculating, but with the media cut off this year, in 2020, the paddock the journalists weren't allowed to go inside the paddock. That's rare that happens. Or you'll see some of my colleagues or any one of us sprinting up and down or strolling up and down the paddock. This time it was totally cut off access. So you might just have more storylines coming out of Drive to Survive than the ones that really hit the mainstream back then due to a cram season. So that's what I'd like to look forward to.
That's actually a good point, because we didn't really have the journalists coming in. All the access, let's say the visual side of things,
Yeah.
it's going to come in, I think, early on in March when the season releases. But that very well leads us on to our first theme of the day. Has to be Red Bull, right? We can't go anywhere else. With all that's happening with Red Bull, them taking over Honda's engine department and coming up with a whole new engine department of their own. That's all the good stuff that's going to happen next year. But really, if you had to choose one big storyline that you love to track this year, Kunal, I mean, that would be Drive to Survive Season 4 for 2021, basically, is what I mean to say. Which one excites you the most? Is it the battle between Perez and Max?
It will be the battle between Perez and Max, right? It's going to be about how they even decided to choose a driver outside of their junior driver program, because that in itself was a major exception they made. But for season 3, Soumil, the most important thing that I would love to sort of hear from the Red Bull stables would be the political battle and the political will and the power they had to unleash onto Formula One to go ahead with this engine freeze, right? Because the hybrid turbo era, Red Bull's biggest excuse, and it seems like a valid one up until now, has been that, hey, we have been denied a competitive power unit, right? And after waiting for seven seasons, they said, you know what, we're going to do it by ourselves. We will make sure we build a power unit. We are an energy drinks team. We couldn't build a chassis and aerodynamics. We've shown we could do that. We're going to go and build a power unit. But for them to do that, the crucial engine freeze and how that came about to happen with the likes of Ferrari, Mercedes, Alpine falling in line, right? That would be one story which I would love. And I mean, even politics is drama. And that's something I would love to sort of see if it ends up making it to Drive to Survive Season 3.
And what about you, Niharika? What is that one storyline that excites you the most for the coming one?
For Red Bull, you mean? Yeah, so with Red Bull, I think one is the one I'd like to see in Drive to Survive would be the Honda exit. And the one that I look forward to see this year in 2021 is going to be how the whole engine build-up happens, like Kunal said. But then again, when you think of it, it makes sense that Red Bull's, this whole engine freeze has come into place in the first place, because that also allows other engine makers to want to enter Formula One right now without, say, a Mercedes or a Ferrari having a head start ahead of them when it comes to developing that V6 turbo technology. And that really makes a lot of sense that Red Bull wants to come up with their own engine. They have the tools to do it, they have the infrastructure for it, and I think after a point, being denied a competitive engine, if they do want to take that up as a challenge, and if they do come up with a good one, that will be a hell of a thing to put up against Mercedes or even to Ferrari, who are right now power. And but the one thing I feel disappointed about at the same time, which I think Drive to Survive Season 3 will highlight, is Honda exiting. They came with this ambitious plan, and Honda's presence in Formula One also meant a boost to drivers like Yuki Tsunoda, or to many more there, Matsushita, or many other drivers who would have come from Japanese Super Formula 4 or from Super Formula or their F3 to F2 to the bigger F2, FIA F2, and then made it to F1. That meant a lot, having that Japanese presence. And if you see the way it finds Torro, Rosso and them were getting along, the relationship they had with Red Bull was far better than the one they had with McLaren. But sadly, with the automotive division taking the whole electrical route, at some point, even the V6 trend does not benefit Honda's road car division. And I think that's the whole call that Honda has taken. So I would really like to see that storyline play out the way it is. And I'm sure Red Bull will be very disappointed. But at the same time, there's also been a lot of verbal fireworks from Max this season. The same Alonso, maybe not as aggressive as Alonso did. He didn't call it a GP2 engine. But there have been verbal fireworks by Max because he had 3 retirements. And they've all indicated towards Honda. So I really see the behind the scenes storyline regarding that. I mean, if you remember the team radio in the last season that Max had, a lot of it, the whole team radio was out there. Like, he did not. I think it was just a subtle hints to Honda, but every time he had a retirement, there was a whole spray of obscenities along with. Yeah, it was just without highlighting Honda on the whole. So yeah, you've got to. I'd love to see that.
I mean, we know Max. He will fire his shots if he has to. He will. That's the thing. Should be interesting to see how that plays out. Again, knowing that Yuki Tsunoda being brought into the team, and that is at the same time when Honda leaves. That should be fun to watch out for. But let's move to McLaren, because clearly there's a buzz of excitement around them, Niharika, this year, with Daniel Ricciardo coming in, and more importantly, the Mercedes engine. I think there are going to be a ton of storylines that'll be so much fun to watch with them in the Drive to Survive season.
Yes, I do. I feel McLaren, the whole package of McLaren and Mercedes is going to be really exciting. The whole the storyline of Ricciardo flipping out on Renault and making that switch is going to be even more exciting, and Alonso taking his seat. So that driver shuffle was really exciting. It all happened. It was one seat leading to a catalyst effect in the whole drivers market. So that's going to be very exciting to watch. But looking forward to next season, I think the whole Lando, Ricciardo, and McLaren and Mercedes, the whole quarter that it forms, sounds like the most marketable package that you'd want there in the form of a competitive team. And I'm really looking forward to that, because that might just put they might give Aston Martin a head-to-head, because one can't forget McLaren has Peter Pedromo in the McLaren design section. It used to be Adrian Newey's pupil, and they've always had the second best chassis after Red Bull.
Yeah.
There was a time when they were, I think it was the Alonso Van Dorn years, when they had the second best chassis on track, and or the best chassis, in fact, to a large extent. And you never know when they come up with a good package. And now they're a reorganized team, if you look at it, after Zach. And that might just create some fireworks for next year. I mean, for this year, for this season.
What about you, Kunal? I mean, I'm quite intrigued to see how the whole saga of Carlos Sainz leaving would be portrayed. Is that the most exciting thing for you for season 3?
Unfortunately, driver shuffles don't really excite me, because I'm of the Bernie Eccleston mentality that the easiest to replace in a car is a driver, right? And I think the only driver who I sort of felt a little bit for this year was Checo Perez, because of we've discussed it several times, and
Yep.
when he was without a seat till after the last race of the season. But back to McLaren, and the one storyline that I would love to see, which again I know is never going to make it to the surface, is why could McLaren not pursue what Red Bull did with Honda? Was it a lack of thinking? Was it a lack of intent? What is the lack of belief? Clearly, to me, was a lack of political power that McLaren would have. Because if the likes of Red Bull, because, they are more recent world champions in Formula One, and the recency of wins definitely helps in your negotiations, right? But it's like McLaren had to endure the worst of Honda, and Red Bull are walking away with the best of Honda, right? And to me, it would be great to know why they sort of couldn't do the same thing. And of course, like I said, it's never going to make it to the surface.
But here's what I'd like to add in there. I think the reason why they weren't able to make it happen that way that Red Bull did was, with McLaren, what they said is, give us an engine that fits our car. And what Red Bull told Honda was, build an engine that is competitive and we'll fit our car around it. So the relationship between Woking and the workforce at Woking and in Tokyo was soured with the miles between a totally British structure of working as compared to a more modern version. And don't forget, half that era was Ron Dennis and then Zach Brown. Yeah. So it was an old school OCD instrument orchestrated work style, and a very old school way of functioning as a team with the old McLaren that had partnered with Honda. And with Red Bull, it was a newer team. yes, it is British based, it is Milton Keynes based, but also they had a different wing in Faenza. They started out,
Yep.
they experimented with Honda on the junior team. They had 2 other cockpits to play with, and then they came onto the senior team. The whole scenario there, where Franz Tost had a good relationship with Tokyo, they were constantly visiting and being encouraged. I think culturally able to integrate the whole work dynamic than what McLaren was able to do with them. With McLaren and them, there was a lack of understanding. There was a lack of understanding how Japanese culture works. And
Exactly.
the Japanese work culture, I think they would really take it to heart, but would criticize all the way. And then also with Fernando going on the radio didn't really help.
Yeah.
And Fernando as a driver in that team didn't help the whole disaster that it turned out to be. So it didn't add to Honda's PR value either. And with Red Bull, you've had no such drama, apart from, yes, they've had engine failures. At the same time, they've also given the best engine. I mean, the Honda engine was much better than the Ferrari one in terms of output or HP, if you have to say. It was far more, it was a quicker car, it was a quicker engine. And don't forget how many of these, even a Torro Rosso won a race last year. So I'd say like that dynamic, these two teams were able to pull out or help extract the best out of them, as compared to McLaren, on the other hand, which just failed to, play Honda to their advantages. So,
yeah, didn't quite work out well culturally for them. If anything, if there's a positive from that, it just got both Honda and McLaren to get a new version out from themselves, a new, better version of themselves. So I think that's a silver lining to that.
Yeah.
But we can move on to Aston Martin, previously called Racing Point, previously called the Pink Mercedes. But on the whole, Kunal, it's a year of change. It's a year of transformation. Sebastian Vettel comes in. I think a storyline that I'm very, very excited to look forward. Very, very excited to see in this year's Drive to Survive. It just has to be how the team got taken over by Lawrence Stroll coming in. Just the whole rebranding process. It's been a big change in the last 6 odd months. And who can forget the Pink Mercedes saga that went on last year?
Yes, I hope they don't do an overdose of the Pink Mercedes saga, because it's really technical and sort of shows Formula One in bad light, that there was sort of a loophole which everyone missed to, plug at the right time. But the one storyline that I would love to sort of hear more about and see in the season 3 of Drive to Survive, when it comes to Racing Point, Aston Martin, etc., is what you pointed out, Soumil, the whole rebranding process, and how it sort of came to fruition. And given that I worked with the earlier avatar of Racing Point, Force India, I can say with a lot of surety now that Aston Martin was in talks with Force India for a partnership forever since I could remember, right? And what it took for it to happen was a common owner.
And at last, that has been done. There are reports that are saying that Lawrence Stroll may as well sell his stake in Aston Martin, move on and leave after this deal is done. Who knows? That's all for later on. That's all rumors. But Niharika, what are you most excited to see? Is it the storyline of how they portray Seb joining Aston Martin, or maybe even kicking out Perez? Because that is really sensitive one that hit right here. When that was the sad one.
I really felt for Checo then. Because I felt Checo was more deserving to be in that team than a father's son. And if Formula One, it'll be really sad if Formula One becomes a whole saga of father and son teams, rather than what it has been, which is legacies like Mercedes, Ferrari, Porsche, Aston Martin, or names that have been in the sport that make the sport so iconic, and manufacturers to tire makers, or privateers like Williams, McLaren. And if it becomes a story about fathers and sons, I think that will be a really one. And I think Checo deserved to be there. He had really helped that team in its bad times, when it was transitioning from Force India to Racing Point. Checo had really made that happen. Even I remember in the Malia days, there was a point when he and Nico, he had pioneered the whole, they weren't getting paid, and the whole Malia fiasco had gone up in the air. It was he who took Nico and the others and got their driver contracts for that year sorted, or driver salaries sorted for that particular year. I think it was 16 or 17, if I'm not wrong. And there is, if you have a driver that's been there, that's literally home for you, and then there's this new kid who is performing but not yet, and could have I mean, Lance could have gone to any other team. He could have sat it out because his
Yeah.
performance wasn't exceptional. And just because his father owns the team, that still doesn't make him excuse him from sitting on the bench if he doesn't perform like Albon did. But it sliced Albon's drive off. And don't forget the catalyst effect it had of releasing Checo. You could have had a Nico next to Max, which was a much better dynamic than Checo coming in for the whole dynamic of that.
Yeah.
Because of this. So I mean, yeah, that's the part where I mean, that's the part I don't like about this whole saga of Aston Martin. But then I'm also excited to see Seb there. I mean, the part of Vettel coming in. Finally, if that is the change of scenery he needs to, mentally renew himself or renew his confidence, and if they can give him a competitive car that, say, beats a Red Bull or is on par with a Red Bull and somewhere has enough to keep him behind Lewis or even give Lewis a run for his money or even keep Bottas at bay, there's nothing like that. Even if if they really come up with their own tools and better tools than a pink Mercedes, I think that'll be quite a competitive package to look forward to this year.
Yeah, exactly. With the regulations trying to outlaw a copycat car, essentially, it should be fun to see what they can come to do this year. But again, families being families, I mean, Lawrence Stroll, giving Lawrence Stroll the drive, you kind of expected this to happen. Not really the most comfortable thing in the world, but it is what it is. Coming to Sebastian Vettel, though, sometimes it just takes a change of scenery for a champion to excel. We've seen it in other sports, we've seen it everywhere. From one champion to the other one, Fernando Alonso is going to have a change of scenery as well. He's a young driver coming up to a newly rebranded Alpine team. Okay, I know we've made 1,000 jokes about Fernando being a young driver, but still, Kunal, I think there's a lot of good stuff that we can see in Drive to Survive this year with Alpine. I think the fact that Ricciardo got his first podium and the whole tattoo gate thing, that'll be fun. And then Renault protesting, that should be a spicy story. That should come up well.
Yes, the skeptic in me says that there was definitely some sort of understanding between teams so that the whole pink Mercedes saga doesn't blow onto our faces in an already impacted year. So that's probably one of those interesting stories which will never come out. And it's not against Formula One's history for such settlements to happen, or like I would say, out of court settlements or in paddock settlements in this case. But when it comes to Alpine, the unfortunate part is that Cyril is no longer with the team. But apart from the double podiums they had, and Esteban pulling out some couple of strange, interesting performances, we all would love to know if the tattoo actually happened, and if so, where did it happen? Right? That's all that we really wish to know, because in 2021, Alonso is anyway going to make the headlines, right? But for 2020,
I hope it was the Red Bull logo that was tattooed on, just to make it more sour. I mean, considering all that's happened between Cyril and Red Bull in all the past years. But hey, let's hope that they've got it in. But Niharika,
It was supposed to be a honey badger.
Sorry?
It was supposed to be a honey badger.
Ah, that would have been fun.
It was supposed to be a honey badger.
That's one he will never forget.
Yeah. And that would be a fun storyline for the fans. But I think this whole transformation of Renault becoming Alpine, Alonso returning to his old home, and Cyril leaving is very interesting, because there was a plot line in the past where Vasseur started that team with Cyril, and the reason Vasseur left and has gone and done fantastically well and transformed Sauber to Alfa Romeo is, at that particular point, he didn't get along. A rumor had it, or speculation had it, that he did not get along with Abiteboul. So that's how Hülkenberg also, and his whole journey, and the whole driver selection, or the drivers they got, the whole targets that they were to meet by 2020 to 2021, the whole structuring of the team really got hit after Vasseur left. And now Abiteboul leaving, I don't think it's going to have that big of impact on that team, depending on who they replace him with. But it might just bring in a renewed energy, a renewed atmosphere there. And I think Renault have made gains, but they still slag behind. I mean, they still lag behind, engine-wise. I think they lag behind a Honda, or there are just too many teams with Mercedes power. If you look at it for the next year, I mean, for this year's perspective, you have two nice teams like Force India and Aston Martin and McLaren, two teams like that with Mercedes power. That's almost your fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, your midfield taken, unless AlphaTauri pulls out a few rabbits out of the hat and makes it up there. So I don't know how Alpine would fit in there. It's going to take them 1 year probably of a transition time, I put it that way, to actually get back up competitively. So yeah, that's going to be interesting to see how that whole team and its new packaging works.
I'm keen to see how they portray Fernando Alonso, whether they show him as a glorious returning world champion or someone who's taking the seat of younger drivers. Again, Netflix has the power to do that. Let's see how they do it. But Mercedes is next, and there is a lot of good stuff with them. I think this year, honestly, there's nothing in the back end, right? It's all stable. It's all as calm as it can ever be. The Toto leaving, that's something that comes up every single year, but we've grown used to it at this stage. But how do you think they'll portray George Russell? Because that period, the Sakura Grand Prix weekend, I think that'll make for a very, very good episode on Drive to Survive, Niharika.
Yes, because I think Russell coming in and pulling out the performance he did, and the way he performed, really strong armed them with their negotiations for the contract with Lewis at some point. That's why Lewis came back for the last race. I feel that's my personal opinion. I think that's the reason why Lewis came back for Abu Dhabi, or he wrapped up the title. He did not. He could have called it holiday. He could have started his off season the moment he got diagnosed with COVID. Yeah. And that's going to be interesting to see that. And I think Mercedes, the whole young driver, the senior drivers, and the young guard coming in and the old guard going out. It's really going to be interesting to see how that's playing up, because don't forget, in this post-pandemic world, Formula One cannot afford the 40 million and 50 million salaries anymore. And it is in a place where if a younger driver is able to do that in a lesser amount of money, that driver is, a more wanted commodity than, say, a multiple world champion. And that's the whole storyline that Russell brings in. And also, I think, when it comes to the Toto story, I don't know. I mean, every year we hear that same rumor again and again. But I also want to see Valtteri's saga, because this year Lewis had no contender but Valtteri. So I want to see his saga and how the whole dynamic is played out behind the scenes, because Max couldn't compete enough. And then you saw Bottas was only able to delay Lewis from wrapping up the title. But that whole number 2 tag that has been thrown at him more rigorously last year than ever before, I'd really like to see that play out. And what Toto has to say about both those drivers, because they were heavily criticized to some point.
I mean, Toto won't say anything. At least he's team boss. He'll try to keep it as diplomatic as possible. But you're right. That psychological pressure that may come on Bottas, seeing that portrayed, it's going to make for a good episode. And I hope Bottas is doing fine. It's not easy to deal with that kind of pressure. But Kunal, coming to Lewis, it's that kind of thing where it's the rumor with Chennai Super Kings and MS Dhoni, right? It comes up every year that he's going to leave, but he never does. And they can't possibly take the cameras to the board meetings, can they? Where they were discussing about George Russell being a cheaper alternative.
Zoom meetings.
The Zoom meet. Exactly. Zoom meetings. Yeah. COVID times. Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, based on what Niharika and you have been just exchanging views right now, for Mercedes, their classic issue is the driver getting bigger than the brand. That was the question that was also asked during Michael Schumacher and Ferrari's time as well. Is it Schumacher that's winning, or is it the car Ferrari that's giving him the wins, right? And that's the question. Is it the driver? Is it the car? The quintessential question. And with George Russell jumping in at the Sakir Grand Prix and doing what he did, again, just goes on to sort of strengthen Mercedes' belief that, hey, it is the car that we need to showcase as the main winning machine and not just Lewis Hamilton, right? But sticking to that same theme of thinking, right, is for Mercedes, 2020 was also them getting back to being the best power unit in the business. And it wasn't a case of Ferrari's power unit losing power. It was the case that Mercedes rose to Ferrari's challenge that was sort of thrown to them in the last few races in 2019. and they already made a world championship power unit go better. This to me would be a very good storyline, because Formula One is a battle of the constructors as well, and just the way we were all wondering what actually happened between Ferrari and the FIA, where Ferrari had to sort of lose 50-60 horsepower. I'd love to know how Mercedes rose to the challenge to claim the number one, the best power unit tag in the paddock for like the
Guys,
seventh
after this
season
is
in a row.
done, right? Hungarian GP pole lap. Watch it. You'll know exactly what we're talking about. Insane. But let's move to Alfa. Wait, what do we talk about here? I mean, in the last live session that we had with Abhishek, we literally had to think extremely hard to find a storyline for Alfa Romeo because there literally is none.
Actually, there is.
It's been a bit of a dull patch for them. Now, what is it,
Actually,
Niharika?
there is. For Alfa Romeo, I would really want to know how Vasseur helped Giovinazzi and Kimi both retain their seats, and how he did not get bullied by the Ferrari name or the Mazepin name,
Exactly.
or the names that were entering F1, but decided to give his drivers a chance and was ready to stick with that package. So obviously, Vasseur believes in that package working for them, because Alfa Romeo has not performed badly. Alfa Romeo has done a far better job than its factory outfit. At some point in all the races, a majority of the races, there was an Alfa leading a pack of Ferraris.
Yeah.
You've noticed that all of last season. In fact, we've forgotten. So I would like to see how that has really changed the atmosphere at Hinwil, because right now they have the most cost-effective drivers. They don't have to have a simulator or driver come down there. One driver has a simulator in his house. Everything works for them. And I mean, I would love to see a very interesting storyline there would be how the Schumacher name was to come and sit alongside Kimi, somebody who Michael Schumacher was a fan of to start with.
Ah,
And
that's a good one.
and how Kimi carries on staying in the sport, because the other line is also, like you said, Hamilton keeps saying he'll retire after so and so, and that rumor keeps floating. I think there's less to that than the amount of times the rumor floats that Kimi might just retire this year. So that, and whether he's really taking away a young driver's seat, or does it really work for him in Alfa Romeo, where they do need a driver like him to keep a team that small running. Because don't forget the amount of money he brings. He brings in Singa, he brings in a lot more sponsors that, say, another young driver wouldn't have brought in to run a team like Alfa Romeo. And how Giovinazzi deserved to stay there compared to other drivers who would have come in. So why the importance of an Italian driver in Alfa Romeo? And I'd really like to see how that played out. Because there were a lot of takers for that drive, both those seats.
Exactly. I was surprised to see why Mick wasn't there, why he went to Haas, but we'll come to that towards the very end. It's our special gift, right? Haas towards the end. We know that Drive to Survive is just made for them. But more on that later. But it's simple, it's effective, it's stable, and sometimes stability is good, Kunal. I think that it may not lead to the most spectacular Netflix episode, but it does lead to a very astutely operated team in the end.
Yeah, I mean, if I was Netflix, and I know, a couple of times I've spoken to the producers out there, the one thing I would tell them if they have to speak about Alfa Romeo is just do a Kimi Raikkonen
I'd love to
special.
do that.
Given the Iceman, given the Iceman and his personality and his demeanor, just do a Raikkonen special. And I'm sure Niharika will, resonate with what I'm going to say next. But even if it means that they just put a camera on one of, on a high rise when Kimi is doing his media interviews, just to see how the media loves him and how he, treats the media. And we've all been.
But
he
also has his favorites in the media. I have never answered Kimi question. Kimi answer. I don't get one words. And Stefania Bocchi, Arriva Benny's wife, knew that very well, that whenever I asked Kimi a question, I'd always get a paragraph. Apart from me, Lawrence Bello and two more British journalists are the maximum he gets. Otherwise, it's all one-word answers. And I would always have a paragraph. So he also has his few favorites. And I remember, in Alfa Romeo, when he moved there, in Ferrari, I remember taking the Kimi autobiography had released. I remember reading that, and that had unleashed a whole different perspective on Kimi. And there was another book written by a colleague of mine, Mark Priestley. It's called The Mechanic. which talks of Kimi's earlier years in Kimi, Lewis, Alonso's earlier years, and even Mika Häkkinen's earlier years in McLaren. And I think the whole narrative of how big a prankster he can be, not just with the media, but how he can be with Giovinazzi, how he can be in the team. It's a whole different person there. The way he's with the media is the part he doesn't like. And if he likes you, you get a paragraph of a long answer. But otherwise, if you notice him, I'd like a Netflix camera to be put in as a spy cam on Kimi. Maybe I'd like that to happen. If if Alfa Romeo had to be put in a storyline, like put a spy cam in that hospitality or in that team building, and then cover Kimi. So yeah, that's one thing I would like to look forward to. And it's I think he's become more approachable ever since he's gone to Alfa Romeo, because when I took it for his book signing, Ferrari was such a stuck-up team that even getting your book signed was hard with them. And I remember taking another copy the following season when he moved to Alfa Romeo, and within minutes it was done. Of course, one thing helped is it was also Monisha's previous team. And she had actually, because of her, I knew a lot of people at Sauber. And that became Alfa Romeo. So it was very easy to get things done in that Italian atmosphere compared to, say, the whole Ferrari, which is cut off from the media. And it has this whole, what do you say? It has this whole cut off media approach to start with. And it kind of benefited Seb and Kimi, but it also hampered Kimi in that team. It also Kimi from being put out there as the Kimi he is, which is a lot of fun, which Lotus used to do back in the day. Remember that, Kunal? When Lotus used to have those angry bird, they used to have a lot of jokes. That Twitter handle was crazy on Kimi.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's the kind of content on Kimi you'd like to see when he's with one of these teams, which wasn't possible, say, with a Ferrari.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Good that you mentioned Ferrari there. I think they're the next team that we're going to come up to. And from the joy and delight of Kimi Räikkönen and his lovely social media presence, we sadly have to move to the damp frustration that they had last year. I think that'll make for some show, Kunal. That'll make for some show. What we saw last year, just the pressure externally and everything all.
Yes, it will. And I just remembered our colleague Nityanand, right? He would love to know what Ferrari were thinking when they put Rossi out there on their social media, right? But there are so many storylines about Ferrari which we would love to know in 2020. The most obvious one would be what actually was the out of court settlement, or what actually was the settlement between the FIA and Ferrari on the power unit side. And I'm suddenly going to sound like the boring guy who's going on and on about power units, and we all know how unpopular they are. But the most popular storyline would be if they are able to actually showcase with some proof how Sebastian Vettel was getting the stepchild treatment in 2020. Whether it was on the radio, whether it was on the pits, whether it was just a very cold storage treatment, but definitely they failed to extract the most from him.
You know what we can say to that?
Together.
Understood. Copy. That's what his engineer says. Just in case you didn't get that one. But what are you most excited to see about Ferrari, Niharika? Because there's clearly
like Kunal said, I would love to see the whole play out between Charles and Seb. That's one storyline. And the other storyline I think all of us want to know is what agreement FIA made with Ferrari in the first place. What went down there, and the whole saga playing out, which I think, like I said, due to the cutoff access that F1 had towards the print media, which is the sharpest and which is the first one to dive in and dig the stories, there wasn't, I think Netflix is the only one who can highlight it. And that saga, and also the frustrations of the engine backfiring. I mean, the whole, not just the power unit, but they also had a fundamentally flawed chassis that could not be corrected over the season. Normally you develop the chassis towards the season, but it all started right from pre-season tests. The chassis too did not help in. And it's 30% driver, it's 30% chassis, it's 30% engine, and then it's 10% of the bit of luck that comes in. That's how I divide a whole performance package. But in that dynamic, that whole 30%, you had an engine going down, and then you have the other 30 that is holding it down, which is a bad chassis. So it also comes down to the whole renewed structure at Ferrari, which is Mattia Binotto handling too many roles.
Yeah.
In the old days, Ferrari had about 4 or 5 heads for 5 different departments. So it's that whole organizational structure, the criticism to that team in the paddock. I mean, Horner and many others were very vocal. I think, I don't know if it was preseason or when was it, Kunal? Sometime the first few races when they were vocal about that whole Ferrari agreement.
Yeah,
And that whole thing,
that's
how it
correct.
played
Yeah, I mean,
played behind the scenes. This year last year we've had no access, and that'll be a nice way to refresh our memory over the drama last season, just before season kick starts, or the season starts by the time this year. So that'll be a nice timing to get all that on, because the head will be carry-ons from what just happened there, in case Netflix manages unearthing something from that red outfit that there is. Yeah, so that's what I look forward to.
I hope they do. There's a lot of stories from Ferrari, as there will be from Williams as well, because one George Russell, ladies and gentlemen, is a Formula One superstar. Lots of good stuff surrounding him this year, and I think that'll make for, again, as I'm saying, with quite a few other teams, you can get it by this stage. I'm very excited for Drive to Survive. I know, but it'll make for a good episode, seeing how that transition happened. Russell shooting up to Mercedes, but that's more Mercedes, I suppose. More of the back end stuff that we can see for Williams has to be how the Williams family left Formula One after many, many years. What's your take on that, Kunal?
yes, it is. That's the headlines. The sale of the team, the Williams family name staying, but the family not being there. And something which, I sat through a couple of these press conferences on the day the sale happened. And Claire Williams was, of course, told at some point that she will stay on in her role. And promptly the next race, she was asked to be replaced. So she was replaced by a team insider, as we know that, right? So yes, the unfortunate story of the sale, and the reason why I say unfortunate, and something that one of our viewers just has brought up on the live stream, Finton, was how for so many years in succession, despite having the award-winning, championship-winning Mercedes power units, Williams have just not been able to bring themselves up from 10th place in
It was a
championship.
year of improvement, nevertheless, Niharika. They did gain quite a few. And I wouldn't say positions. I just misframed the sentence. I think they gained a lot of time on track, but not enough, clearly.
This is Williams.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, they did make gains on track, but to be honest, if you look at this whole story, I mean, the whole Doralton Capital takeover, and Williams looking for a buyer. I think the Williams family, I think, was looking for an out at some point. The story has been on since last year. Since 2019, we've been hearing stuff, and there's been a lot of speculation. But yeah, I mean, I think what catalyzed the whole scenario was the pandemic situation, where a lot of the teams, I remember, I think it was Gunther Steiner and a few more other small privateer teams started saying that, it's a big deal Formula One is taking, I mean, even starting off for one thing at that particular time. But they all were complaining about how teams might run out of business, and I think teams had started looking for new financiers, because that's the kind of financial losses that a lot of people have taken during that economic slowdown that was caused by the pandemic. So I think that's the part that catalyzed this whole takeover slightly more, that made things happen a little more faster compared to watching Williams be Williams for another season. But I think this was long in the coming, to be honest. I think it was just a matter of a season or two more for that outfit to last as Williams to start with. So yeah, that was that.
True, absolutely. And are you a little surprised, because I am, that the Latifi family wasn't the one that invested, into the team? Of course, the reason why I say invested is because they didn't make a direct investment. You don't know if there is any investment via Doralton, because it's something that that could also be the case, because I remember there was this talk that is Bernie Eccleston one of the backers of
Yeah.
Doralton Capital and so on, right? So I'm a bit surprised and pleasantly
I'm
surprised
glad
that
it's not
the
that,
Latifi
because you have
family
the
that sort of-
Mazepins, you have the Strolls, you have the
Yeah.
Latifis. At least out of that, I mean, Lawrence Stroll on one hand was a savior to save Force India, but I think if you'd seen the bidding war for who buys Force India, Lawrence Stroll was also competing with Mazepin. And this whole billionaire and billionaire kid affair
Yeah.
that comes into Formula One, sadly,
Mm.
F1 needs money. It's unfortunate that the sport and teams are succumbing to this trend of fathers and sons and teams. But where I feel we need more drivers like Yuki Tsunoda, we need more drivers like a Charles Leclerc, we need more drivers like a Verstappen, who, despite having a driver father, actually is exceptional. And that is the kind of, or say a Norris or a Russell. But I mean, the whole Latifi Mazepin trend, I'm really glad Williams did not do that, because I think one of the reasons in the last few years, Williams had become a home to paid drivers more than paid drivers. You had the Maldonados. I mean, how many have you had there? You have had the Sirotkins. I mean, it's just been a
Yep.
parade of them. And they are also the team that, say, nurtured Hulkenberg. They're also a team that brought in talent like Montoya. They're also a team, they're world champions at some point in time. They also
Exactly.
had some really good talent there. And I am happy. In fact, I'd say I'd be very, very glad to see that not happen. I don't know in what capacity Latifi's father is investing into that team. I think it'll be from a very small perspective, more from the pay driver perspective, as in overall. But I don't think it's going to be as a core investor in the way, say, Lawrence Stroll has.
Yep.
So I'm very happy that is there. And even the new buyers seem to be motorsport enthusiasts. They know what
Exactly.
they're doing. It's not somebody outside the fraternity or somebody who doesn't know the math of motorsport. So that'll be interesting to see how that works out for them.
I suppose the owners haven't had experience in motorsport or any sport, but they've hired the right people who've been in the sport before, and that's been a big plus. So they haven't come up and changed everything, said, okay, today we're going to call it the Grove Jaguars or something, what American owners usually do with teams, but they've gone for a more measured approach.
Yes.
And another team known for their measured approach has to be Toro Rosso. And I think that's the excellent thing that you brought out earlier, Niharika, about Toro Rosso integrating well with Honda, having that Faenza unit. That's allowed them to be so good in the midfield. And honestly, where do we begin with them? There are good things to talk about them. They've just been such a nice and likable outfit. But just the way they have exceeded Yuki Tsunoda into the team and have pushed Annika Fiat down, I think that has to be one thing that I'm very keen to see. And also that big win in Monza. How can we forget the big win in Monza? That must be an insane thing to record for the Netflix
Yeah.
crew.
So my younger sibling had raced with Pierre Gasly. So Pierre Gasly, I've watched him over the years, and I watched Giovinazzi and him, and to see Gasly win that in Monza was really special, because I saw him from his F4 days, the French F4 days. And so to see Gasly, I think Gasly overall, when it comes to AlphaTauri as an outfit, they're my favorite team of 2020 at least. They are just such wonderful people. And the way they were able to work with Honda, the way they were able to incorporate the whole culture, Japanese culture, into Faenza and make that package work. I think what they ended up doing is making a more drivable car. Then the Red Bull is harder to drive than the AlphaTauri, and that I think that car probably suited Gasly more than the Red Bull has. And to a large extent, Max Verstappen, being the driver he is able to outdrive the abilities of Red Bull, which Albon wasn't able to do because of the drivability issues with the Red Bull car. And that's where AlphaTauri have really made an easily drivable car.
Exactly.
They have young drivers come in. Yes, Kvyat, I feel a bit bad for him, but sadly that window for him to make it happen got denied or taken away from him back in the day when he was pairing with Ricciardo, if I'm not wrong, when Max replaced him. Now Verstappen happened basically.
Yeah.
And he's got replaced time and time over again. But Yuki Tsunoda deserves to be there. I mean, Yuki Tsunoda, ideally, it is only his, I think it was only his second season in Europe, or in European racing, in European single seaters, and he was almost contending the title. So talent like that can't be ignored. I think they can come into F1, I feel, without winning a title. And I think Tsunoda is just exceptional. And that's kind of people we need. And I think that'll be a big difference with AlphaTauri and its performance. In fact, even I feel it might cost Gasly his popularity, because that's how good Tsunoda is.
Yeah.
Gasly has become a strong driver over the years, but Tsunoda is just good from its inception. So that makes a huge difference when you come to, what do you say, judge two drivers or pitch them against one another. There's one which is developed talent. That's talent that's developed along the way. And
Yeah.
then there is talent that is raw, natural, and just exceptional. And I think Tsunoda is one of those. So I'll be really interested in seeing how that plays out for Gasly. And Gasly and Perez also share a good equation, and they're going to be in the sister team. So I wonder how that is going to work. So yeah, there's a lot of AlphaTauri is going to be quite interesting to see next year. But from the last season, if in Netflix, in the Netflix Drive to Survive 3, yes, that emotional Gasly win is going to be worth the Monza race is going to be interesting. Yeah, so that's something I'd look forward to.
Kunal, Yuki Tsunoda may be short and sweet, but he's such a good driver. And Gasly, I think the emotional element of Antoine Hubert sadly passing away in 2019 and then Gasly getting that emotional win, that will be a brilliant story.
It will, and even more so given just what the Tifosi and the Italian motorsport fans have been through with, heartbreak after heartbreak with Ferrari. So for an Italian team, winning in Monza is always epic.
Yeah.
And Soumil, you and I have read this several years ago through the Brooke Yates book as well. So, that definitely is the big positive story that, I'd love to see on Netflix, because it wasn't the case of the underdog. It wasn't, it wasn't that it was a fluke win. Yes, Lewis Hamilton made a mistake entering the pits, and guess that's what the rule book says, and that's the reason why he got a penalty. But Gasly was measured against Carlos Sainz, who was chasing down, and just that whole battle between two very unlikely winners is what will be the story for Monza and AlphaTauri.
That is AlphaTauri done. Let's move on to the final team and cue the drum roll. Cue all the dramatic music that you possibly can. Let's just say I'm not very good with my beatboxing, so I can't do it manually, but think of it mentally, because it is time for one Haas. Where do we begin, Kunal? I'm going to completely leave it to you. What's going to be your most entertaining story for season 3 of Drive to Survive for Haas? You've got a variety to choose from, to say the least.
I think Gunther Steiner will yet again be
That's the obvious
hero of season 3, without a doubt, right? But if there was one thing, I would love for them to say the actual reason behind why they chose a Nikita Mazepin and decided to stick with him despite all the controversies he's had, even before he got into a Formula One cockpit officially, right? I mean, apart from all the testing he would have done with the team. So that for sure. We've all heard the real reasons, but I want to know like the real reason as to why Mazepin, is there. And of course, we all know that. But for Gunther, given how honest he is on the show, I would love for this honesty to come out even when he's asked about this Mazepin question. And then, of course, apart from that, you've had the Romain Grosjean story.
Yeah.
Unfortunate heartbreak for all the Nordic fans, who've sort of had Kevin Magnussen these years. I would have loved to see him race along in Formula One. And then I'm sure the survival from that accident will be Haas's key storyline. Not the most popular one, I would say. Yes, Romain Grosjean surviving, we've seen that happen. To relive that, not always as good fun, because somebody's literally played life and death and won. But that's what we are probably going to get with Haas.
Niharika, what would you choose? Because we've got Mick, we've got Mazepin, we've got Gunther Steiner being Gunther Steiner, we've got the scenario of replacing Magnussen and Grosjean, we've got what else have we got? We've got a lot of stuff. And the car being frustratingly slow. Their new relationship with Ferrari coming into picture as well. There's a lot to choose from. It's a nice and good buffet in that case.
But I don't think the limelight will be on Haas as much. Apart from, like Kunal said, I think the accident will be one line that might get highlighted. If Haas get enough of get an episode or two, I think, if Haas get that kind of screen time, I think the major storyline is going to be the Grosjean crash. And yes, it's sad to see K-Mag go because Kevin is one of those drivers that's underrated, and he was really a special talent when he came in with McLaren at some point. And yes, it'll be sad to not see him in F1, because he's a nice person and one of the most down-to-earth drivers I've seen in the entire paddock. That'll be interesting to watch. But with Haas, I think the Ferrari storyline, their relationship with Ferrari. I don't know if they have any more storylines that we haven't been able to. That have not come into the public domain because of the cutoff access that the media had. If there are any storylines that Netflix is able to unearth, because that'll be really interesting as to what happens there. But the Mazepin storyline, I think, is that'll be the obvious one too. But Mazepin's storyline has been more off-season after the cameras have switched off more than on-season. So that whole saga playing out hasn't played out really within the camera radius. So I don't think that'll get highlighted as such. But I think the two obvious ones will be the crash and these two drivers losing their drive. And the maximum they could go to is something new or a new side of it come into the limelight. So yeah, that'll be interesting.
I think they'll also focus a lot. What am I saying? They won't focus on the backlash that Mazepin signing has brought about. Why would they? They can't, right? They have to maintain the best interests of the teams, and as much
they can because why wouldn't they?
It's supposed to be a fair, objective ground where you portray things as they happen. But let's be honest, right?
Let's be honest. You have put a lot of sensational, sensational storylines out there.
They have, yeah.
I'll sensationalize it before we end the show, right? What if a paid driver actually brings a budget to Netflix and says, hey, while I pay for my Formula One seat, I will pay Netflix a little more to give me more prominent coverage and say more positive things about that. Because, hey, there are Bollywood celebrities who are doing that. They've got shows on themselves, going on Netflix. It's the good old days of Media Net, on which Bombay Times, Delhi Times, Bangalore Times, etc. have been built by Times of India. And if Netflix gets a couple of millions to just, put some content out there, well, that's money for them as well.
Yeah, wow, that'll be interesting, but that'll put F1 in its real... It will put Formula One as a sport in its real fix. Because the one thing that was there in Formula One is the parity and the whole fairness of the media that is not there in any other sport. It's the only sport where the media is a part of the Formula One family. It isn't like football, or it's not like the way... If you see the way the other is in cricket, or the kind of relations that are there with the team and the media, the drivers and the journalists. Some journalists have grown along with those drivers. They've made made careers and broken careers. They've written off drivers and they've written about drivers right from their cub stages. So the way Formula One works and the role the media plays there, if Netflix pulls off something like that, that'll be... that might just that'll be sensational. But I hope that doesn't happen, because that's not something I'd look forward to. But I do see the whole paid driver versus paid driver debate get bigger and bigger next in the coming season in 2021. I feel that's going to be the highlight of the season to a large extent. That debate, that's going to be a recurring topic. That's going to be a recurring Twitter debate. And we already, one thing we've known is on an F1 weekend, how Twitter can explode into 20 directions over the stupidest story. So, I do see something like that. That particular topic take a lot of the limelight.
Should be fun. Lots of storylines to watch out for. But folks, that's about it from us today. That's all the 10 teams and their most interesting storylines. You know where to watch Drive to Survive. And you also know where to follow Pits To Podium and the Inside Line F1 podcast. Right here, give us a subscribe and give us a good rating if you can. If you liked it, of course. And as I said at the very beginning, if you didn't, feel free to let us know why. We'll always be the first people to read it and to respond and maybe try and improve the show. Let's build a really good community around here. But Niharika, generally, that was really good fun. Glad to have you here on Pits To Podium and on the Inside Line F1 podcast. That was a really fun one.
Yeah, this was a really fun one. Thank you so much.
And finally, Kunal, what are we going to do next? We're going to have lots of good stuff here on Inside Line F1 podcast and on Pits To Podium, haven't we? Just before the season begins.
Yes, there will be one more live stream. We still need to figure out the modalities and the planning around it, but look out for the information on our social media, guys. And Niharika, it's always been a pleasure to speak Formula One to you. I've been doing it with several members of the Ghorpade family, so it's great to have you here, and thank you for your time.
Thanks, Kunal.
So, folks, that was it. See you for the next live stream. And also follow our social pages because we genuinely are going to have a lot of good stuff coming in 2021. But that's for later on. Until then, folks, bye bye. Good night.